This was one of the most uncomfortable moments of my life. The intention was never to experience what it was like to be homeless. After all, I'd been technically homeless myself, and was a guest living at the holiday home from hell. I was lucky enough not to end up on the streets, though. What I wanted to experience was how people's attitude towards me changed according to what they perceived to be my life, to wear the kind of clothes one would normally associate with being homeless. As soon as I entered town, I found out. There was a girl giving out flyers for a local nightclub. She turned towards me, all smiles and outstretched flyer. As soon as she took me in, the smile became horror. She snatched the flyer straight out of my grasp. It was different when the film crew were around, though. They were kind of a shield that made people think twice about me. Standing there holding that sign, though, I felt exposed and undefended. Ironically, I thought the passing shoppers must think I was some kind of art student on a project, and the real homeless must be thinking me an insult to their reality. Neither point of view really was a million miles from the truth. As the day wore on, the message that it is not the clothes or the situation that define a person seemed far too small. I come from a small town, just outside Rotherham, a place called Romarsh. I'd never seen a homeless person before I actually moved to Coventry University. It's quite an intimidating thing the first time you actually come across them. Walking past them in the subway, you feel intimidated to try to give them some money.
There you go, fella.
Oh, cheers, mate. Sound. The first guy I properly knew who was homeless was a guy called, well, the guy who we called Scooby. He was a great bloke, Glaswegian. He used to sell the big issue, and he was selling the big issue. He used to shout out, "Scooby, Scooby-Doo, come and get the big issue! Gazza's not here, so have no fear!" I was having a cigarette outside work one day during break, and Scooby came past with a couple of his mates on the way to the park. We got a couple of White Lightning, you know, the really cheap cider, it's 99p, 7.5%. He sold the big issue for a living, and he was having a day off. He was going to the park with his mates, homeless, sleeping on the streets, and he was taking a day off. That's brilliant. The last time I saw Scooby, he looked great. He got on clean clothes, he looked tidy, he looked dressed. He'd actually got himself a missus, got himself a house, got himself off the streets. I only saw him that one more time, but I remember thinking, well done you. Now Scooby obviously was one of the lucky ones. It doesn't go that way for anybody, but I've got to say, it couldn't have happened to a nicer chap. I really was made up for Scooby. He became one less statistic. But calculating the amount of homeless in the UK remains problematic. The great uncounted and unnoticed do not really appear on any official register, and in many cases seem nervous of any authority attempting to compile such statistics. As the powers that be would appear to have abandoned them, their wariness is completely understandable. There are numbers thrown around, but very few involved in compiling them think they are anything like accurate. Of course, homelessness is much more complex than those sleeping rough. There are hostels, night shelters, sofa surfers, basically anyone without a fixed abode to consider. There are more facts and figures for these guys, but they are disturbingly vast and equally unreliable. I was lucky that my time homeless was brief, but I can assure you of one thing. The first thing that goes is your self-respect, quickly followed by your standards. I was still in the suit, but I can completely understand the reasons for doing so, and maintaining appearances quickly evaporate. It's just all a question of time. The amount of people we perceive to be homeless on the streets, and exactly who they are and what they're about, just does not reflect the reality at all. I met this guy, Steve, outside the library. He bummed a smoke off me once. Well, I say once, I mean, it ended up being lots of times. This guy you'd know was homeless. Had dirty fingernails, smelt of booze, and you know that awful acidic smell. He was a nice chap though. Bummed smokes off me. Occasionally I bought him a coffee. Occasionally I gave him some change. He used to beg. But here's the thing. When I used to actually meet him for IKEA for a coffee, if he'd got some change that he'd actually collected, he would actually buy me a coffee. But you know what really gets to me? Whenever he shook my hand, I felt almost immediately like I wanted to wash it afterwards. Becoming homeless is something few of us expect. A sudden change in your life, one mistake, a simple twist of fate, and you're virtually in the gutter. It should not come as a surprise that councils do have responsibilities to those who are homeless or about to be made homeless. These responsibilities are vague at best. They are legally obliged to provide assistance should you become homeless or be in danger of becoming homeless. But as to whether or not they are required to provide practical assistance depends upon your circumstances. I appreciate that most charities involved in homelessness acknowledge each case tends to be an individual affair, but the guidelines set out to council seems very much a lot of maybes and probables. There is nothing concrete to stop you ending up on the streets. It is a joke that without much humour behind it, that they are required to notify you in writing as to whether they will help you or not. I wonder how many people have struggled to explain there is no address for them to send such a letter. Most people have paid taxes, been involved in voting for their government, people who had a voice. Whether you like it or not, the government has a responsibility to us, and being homeless should not be the sign you have fallen off the care radar. Why is it that mostly it's charities that these people are dependent on? The Salvation Army, Shelter, the Archer Project here in Sheffield. Why is this? The thing that really confuses me is in this modern world of laptops, internet, mobile phones, iPods, still people starving, and there's still people homeless. That can't be right. Surely. My initial intention was to suggest that it is not the clothes or the situation that defines a person. It eventually seemed too small for the whole messy issue that is homelessness. I do honestly believe that it is insane that in this modern world people are still allowed to suffer in such a way, but equally I've got no idea of how to solve it. After shooting had finished, I was attending a Sunday service. Now every week this guy turns up and mutters quietly to himself in the corner, taking no part in the service. It was coming to the part where we actually offer each other a handshake, a sign of peace, and I resolved I was going to go up and shake this guy's hand. In the end I didn't. I failed my own message and my own feelings. In the end it took another member of the congregation to actually step up and shake this guy's hand warmly. I failed totally. I am totally ashamed of this. We hear so much about sympathy for those less fortunate than ourselves, but what about respect? Respect for those dealing with a situation and a life we can barely comprehend, and yes, sometimes in ways that we may otherwise find distasteful. The truth is, the message about judging a person according to what they wear in their situation was not too small. It was way too big for me to initially comprehend.